watched Scoop on Netflix.
Yes, I did too.
List.
What?
Okay.
What? Oh, it's on your list? Is that what you said?
Well, I'm a Billie Piper fan, so of course that's on my list.
Yeah. Okay, so I watched it too. Go ahead.
So it is a movie on Netflix, and it's an insider account of the women on the network Newsnight, which I probably made
Network show. You mean like a news show?
Yes, like an evening news show,
Yes.
but on the BBC network, and how they brought the interview with Prince Andrew at the time to kind of discuss his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and him trying to clear his name and not doing a good job of it.
Oh my God. It was fascinating. Didn't you? I mean, first of all, I did not remember this interview. Apparently it was everywhere. I do remember the fallout from it because I remember hearing about Prince Andrew and his association with Jeffrey Epstein.
It wasn't an association, and this is where some of the clarification needs to come into. It was a friendship over decades. Now, there were people that you can say were associated with Jeffrey Epstein or rode on his jet once or twice or were at events with him or took a photo with them. But then there's really no other depth of relationship.
This is much deeper or extensive.
Yes.
Yeah. Apparently, Prince Andrew was friends with Gillian Maxwell, right?
Right.
Which was Jeffrey Epstein's friend, girlfriend. I don't know
Really
what
fixed
that
her.
relationship was. Yeah.
Right. She's currently in jail for sex trafficking. So, yes, but he had a relationship with Jeffrey that was a friendship that crossed the lines, and he did have a settlement against an underage girl that accused him of sex with a minor, and that is sealed because it was basically settled out of court. It's like, how does the royal family currently, if you watch The Crown on Netflix as well, and it's really been the growth ever since Diana, right? So how do they currently deal with marketing, PR, their public crisis, and how they mismanage it? And obviously in today's times, we've watched it with, the spare Harry and Meghan Markle, and they're really bad at it.
Yeah, they make a lot of
really
missteps,
bad at it. So this is a early example of it. So there's 3 women at Newsnight.
The interview took place in 2019.
Right. So Gillian Anderson at this point is like, are you British? Like, what's happened here? I mean, like, she keeps getting all these very British roles. She played Margaret Thatcher in The Crown.
She does a fantastic job. She really,
basically what would be the news anchor that is going to do the interview. And Billie Piper, which was, I'm trying to think, as a U.S. audience, I was like, where do I know her from? That wig was alarming, or the hairdo.
I know,
it was like
it's funny.
Really crunchy perm that she had.
I do sympathize because my hair can be very crunchy perm looking.
I think we reviewed the show that she was on this podcast. I Hate Susie.
Everybody Hates Susie?
Everybody Hates Susie.
No,
And
it's
then-
not Everybody Hates Susie.
I hate Susie.
Hates Raymond.
Everybody
I
loves
hate
Raymond.
Susie.
I Hate Susie.
She was on Doctor Who.
This is what I knew her from, because I think it was on
Lives of a
HBO
Call
or one of our cable networks here.
Showtime.
Secret Diary of a Call Girl.
Oh,
Now
I
that
didn't ever
ended in
watch.
2011, so that's why I'm like, where do I know her from? What do I know her from? She plays the producer that starts to sniff out that there's a story here. This is what the caliber of BBC or journalism, the bar that's been set. It was felt as though the angle that she was going for was going to be too tabloid, to daily news and things like that. So she was getting pushback. Like, this is not the angle we go. And it was her pushing it forward and eventually feeling out the Andrew angle that got this interview to happen. And that, don't you, Prince Andrew, want to explain your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah.
Don't you want to put your side of the story out? I mean, this might have been the time, or might have been wise of them just to do nothing.
Yeah.
But Prince Andrew is played by an unrecognizable Rufus Sewell.
Rufus Sewell, yeah.
They first show because he's kind of bloated face. But then the voice and the eyes, I was like, that can't be, because just recently we got a very sexy version of him in The Diplomat. Like, sexy, like nude scenes, like basically like. So I'm like, what? And then you actually see there's video of how he had to transform with like full
prosthetics
and stuff.
I mean, his eyes were still very recognizable.
Well, that's why I was like, that can't be him. And I do think, when you deal with that level of special makeup and prosthetics and things like that, it seemed like the first episode or two there really went far. And then there was a little bit of pullback. Like, God, does he need to look that bad? So I'm almost worried there was a little like, gosh, he looks horrible. And the rest of the cast is fantastic. And they do it with enough sort of urgency and titillation that it keeps you very involved in it. And just because, understand, like I said, the fake news culture that we deal with now, it's like, them trying to get the real story and get out what was the relationship and should he be held accountable. Now, there ended up being repercussions civilly for him. And then in the royal family, I think, this interview, when they finally got it, they were just like, we're going to let him talk and hang himself if that's what's going to happen. And he kind of did. The evidence didn't back up that I didn't really have a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein or...
Yeah, there was too much documentation of all the times that they had been together or he'd been on the jet.
He would stay at this penthouse. Mm-hmm. He would fly on the jet. He would go to this infamous island. I mean, like I said, there were other celebrities that crossed paths or jet flying, and I'm just going to lay it out. There was another lifetime I had where you could be in New York or some part of the world, and someone goes, well, just jump on my jet and fly home with me. It happens all the time in that world. It does. And you may not vet exactly because the owner of the jet might not even be there. So you get on the jet and you've taken the jet and now you're on a fly log and you're like, I just took a flight home with them. Like nothing nefarious happened. So it's a weird sort of like, how involved were you and what happened? And Prince Andrew had way too much of a relationship and documented where you're like, you couldn't have been this ignorant because Jeffrey Epstein, years before that, had been convicted of a sexual assault.
He had been convicted of something, yes. Mm-hmm.
So therefore, take your distance. He's out of your life, which a lot of people then did at that point. They're like, oh, maybe I suspected, maybe I had suspicions, and now that I'm out. No, Prince Andrew went and stayed at his house and tried to say, well, I was trying to dissolve the relationship over multiple days.
But I felt I should do it in person. No.
Oh, Lord.
No.
So the repercussions for him have also been at the end of it. Like the royal family has stripped him of his duties and a lot of his accolades and titles. And we really haven't seen him in the public eye.
It really feels like it was fallout from this interview. This was the interview that did it. Yeah.
It kind of should have been. So rightfully so. Done properly in some ways. Maybe the royal family then at some point started to handle it properly. So it's just very well done. Excellent cast. It's like an hour and a half. It's like a traditional movie. It's called Scoop on Netflix. Highly recommend it.
Oh, highly recommend.
And it's really about how the news cycle works and the anchor, the producer, the head of the news division. It's really how they decide and produce news segments around obviously a very, controversial, titillating topic, but at the same time showing how it's done.
Yeah. I just want to chime in on two things. Mm-hmm. First of all, that this was based on a book. So it was actually this main character that we're talking about, played by Billie Piper. Sam McAlister had written a book about this. So it's based on her. So the crunchy perm. And
it's really crunchy.
She's kind of like, not boisterous, but like, she
doesn't have what's called like a refined, sophisticated look because it is like the crunchiest perm. There's like kind of big nails. There's big lips. Just the way she carries herself.
Like cheetah boots.
She definitely does not fit into the newsroom culture when she comes in. So she right out of the gate, it's a little like, so you're not necessarily our normal standard producer.
That was the other point I wanted to make. She was not a producer. She was a talent booker, or like a booker being like, go to set up the interviews or get the experts on or whoever. So she was all about relationships and getting to the people that you can't normally get to. But they didn't explicitly say it, but this elevated her to a producer because she did set this up. She had pieces in place that when the story fell into what they would consider news, and then they were all like, oh, now we do want this interview and think it would be considered newsworthy and not just tabloidy. She was the one who had that relationship to make it happen and then was in the room when the interview was done. And they did a little behind the scenes relationship of her and her mother that I thought was really interesting. And the mother was like,
she's a single mom and, being a working single mom, especially in a news cycle where there are no 9 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
The mom and her had an excellent dynamic. Amanda Redman plays the mother.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's really, she encourages her daughter to follow her instincts and pursue this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was great. The cast, like I said, mostly British, except for, I don't know how Gillian Anderson keeps getting herself in there.
No, she's basically like an honorary Brit at this point.
Seriously.
She's just in everything.
Yeah.
Speaking of, okay, so this is going to be a funny connection. So Gillian Anderson is in Sex Education. Now, one of my other favorite characters in this movie is the photographer, and he is also from Sex Education. What an interesting part of the story that he took this picture, and it was like the one picture of Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein like walking through the park, having the two of them together, like, because otherwise it was behind closed doors in various mansions and whatever, and you didn't see. This was the picture that really made trouble for Andrew. And I love that character. I thought he did a great job, and it was a funny little connection that he's also from Sex Education. So
his
the
name
two
is
of them,
Connor Swindells.
Yeah, Connor Swindells. He was also in Barbie. I called him out for being in Barbie. Oh. He was the one who worked for Mattel, who's like running through the office at one point. Anyway, he's great.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I also highly, highly recommend.
Yeah, loved it.
Just so you know.
Yeah.
Gillian Anderson, born in Chicago.
Yes.
Then, soon after birth, whatever that is, 15 months in Puerto Rico. Then she was in London until she was 11.
Oh,
international.
Okay.
So yes, this is why
Isn't she married to a British director too? That's part of what's going on here.
Peter Morgan, very all up in. I mean, yeah, that's may have something to do with the Crown television show.
Yeah.
But then also look, Order of the British Empire. So she's for real.
For realsies.
We're going to give her all the credit then. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, she's doing a fantastic British accent all the time. Great job.
Yes.
I think people are actually more surprised that she's American than us knowing her from X-Files and whatever and being like, what do you mean? Why is she doing all this British stuff? Other people are like, what do you mean? She's American? Yeah, she is.
Actually, if you are a certain generation and don't really know of X-Files.
Yeah, you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. You almost assume at this point she's a British actress.
For sure.